I want you to picture a landscape far different from the one you know. Think of a small farming village nestled in the rough countryside of Korea not long before the world was shaped by a second Great War. Imagine simple fields and modest homes pressed under endless skies. This is where the story begins, not with luxury or promise, but with hardship and effort. A boy was born into this world in 1915. His name was Chung Ju-young. He did not come from wealth. He did not have privilege. He came from a family that struggled to survive day by day and meal by meal. The air he breathed carried the smell of earth and rice, and the rhythm of his life was dictated by the slow, tiring work of farmers trying to feed their large family. From the very start, Chung's life was shaped by responsibility. He was the oldest of many siblings, and that meant carrying the weight of his family's future almost from the beginning. There was never enough money for school. There was never enough money for anything beyond what was absolutely necessary. While other boys might learn to read and write, Chung learned something else entirely. He learned hard labor. He learned the feel of sunburned skin and muscles that ached all the way to the bone. He learned to wake before sunrise and work until the sun sank behind the hills. But beneath these hardships, a quiet fire was burning inside him. He had a hunger not just for food, but for something more. For a life that reached beyond the rows of rice paddies and the slow seasons of planting and harvest. Chung dreamed of going to school. He dreamed of something bigger than the horizon that bordered his fields. But whether he expressed that dream in words or held it quietly in his heart, no one in his village could offer money for books or teachers. There was no school near enough, and even if there had been, his family could not afford it. Instead, he watched other children go about their days learning from instructors, talking about the world beyond their small town, and he felt two things at once, admiration and longing. But life did not stop for longing. Life taught Chung something harsher before it ever gave him a chance to learn the gentle lessons found inside a classroom. In those early years, he saw the harsh reality of poverty. He saw his parents strain to stretch each meal into something that could fill their children. He saw his mother worry over small injuries and illnesses because medicine was too costly. He saw how even another week of good weather could mean a difference between scarcity and ruin. The experience shaped him. It made him determined to change his destiny. But at that stage, Chung didn't know how he would do it, only that he could not remain where he was. When he was just a teenager, Chung made his first attempt to leave home. He tried to venture out, to find work in a city where people seemed to have more food, more clothes, more of everything. But his father, worried and stubborn, brought him back. Chung was determined, though, and he tried again. This cycle of trying and returning happened more than once, each attempt fueled by youthful desperation and growing resolve. On his final attempt, he took a bold step that would become the stuff of legend. He sold one of the family's cows, one of their most valuable possessions, so he could buy a train ticket to Seoul, the city that, for him, represented opportunity and escape. That cow represented his family's survival, and selling it was a decision heavier than most adults ever make. But he did it anyway. Imagine the emotions in those moments. Relief mixed with guilt. Excitement shadowed by fear. He had left behind his family, his home, and the very thing that helped them survive weeks of uncertainty. But he also carried in his pocket the ticket that might change the course of his life. Stepping off the train in Seoul, he entered a bustling world of noise and strangers, of merchants calling out goods and people hustling for a living. He was a quiet face in a crowded station, but he had a burning ambition inside him that refused to stay silent. At first, life in the city was far from glamorous. There was no instant success or quick fortune waiting for him. There was only work, relentless and humble work. He took any job he could find. He worked as a helper in rice shops. He carried deliveries, he did odd jobs wherever there was a demand for strong hands and a willing heart. These early jobs were not the beginnings of a dream come true, instead, they were the foundation of something much deeper. With each day of effort, he learned about trade, about people, about how money moved and markets formed. He listened closely to those around him. He watched how business owners operated, how customers negotiated, and how trust could make or break a small shop. Even when the work was physical and exhausting, Chung soaked up knowledge like a dry sponge soaking up water. It was during these years that Chung began to understand something essential. He realized that success wasn't only about skill or strength. It was about trust and reliability. People would come back to you again and again when they knew you stood by your word, when you delivered what you promised. This idea would stay with him for his entire life. While other young men might have spent their money and time on rest and leisure, Chung spent every moment deepening his understanding of how business worked. He had no choice but to learn quickly because he knew there was no safety net and no fallback plan. Chung didn't start with fancy ventures. He started with simple work, and with it built something more important than money, respect. He learned how to count profits and losses, how to manage a small team, and how to communicate effectively. Each day he measured his progress not by the size of his paycheck, but by how much closer he felt to independence. But even as he learned and grew, he never forgot where he came from. He knew every moment away from his village was a moment filled with sacrifice and longing, not just for himself, but for his family who had supported him in their own way. Before long, he had saved enough to take a significant step forward. Using the knowledge and money he had gathered, he opened his own auto repair garage. At the time, automobiles were not common in Korea, and repair shops were scarce. But there was demand from people who needed reliable service and honest prices. Chung's garage did not start as a major success. But it was a beginning he could call his own. He worked alongside his mechanics, learning engines, learning machines, and learning how to serve customers who expected quality and fairness. Every day he learned more about how to run a business, how to negotiate with suppliers, and how to build a reputation that attracted people willing to pay for reliability. The years went by. Korea was changing too. The world entered war again. Empires shifted. Nations were in turmoil. When Japan's rule over Korea ended after World War II, the country was left broken, but it was also a place of opportunity for those willing to rebuild. Chung saw this clearly. He didn't just see ruins and rubble. He saw roads that needed building, bridges that needed repair, and a nation that needed vision. So, where others saw destruction, he saw possibility. And he stepped into that possibility with confidence, even if others thought he was taking a reckless gamble. He founded Hyundai Engineering Construction. The word Hyundai itself means modernity in Korean, a name that reflected not just a business, but a belief in a new age. The company began by taking on infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, buildings. In a nation ravaged by war, these were not simple jobs. They were national necessities. But Chung and his team tackled them with intensity and discipline. They completed projects that others thought too difficult or too costly. Hyundai Construction became known for its strength and reliability, and with each successful project, the company earned trust and larger contracts. Chung was building more than roads and bridges. He was building confidence in himself, in his workers, and in a nation's ability to rise again. Soon, Hyundai was no longer just another construction firm. It was an engine of progress for a country determined to redefine itself. And for Chung, this was just the beginning. When the construction business was running smoothly, Chung Ju-young began to think bigger. He had seen the potential of Korea to rise from its ruins, and he believed that the country could not remain dependent on imports for its most basic needs. He dreamed of industries that could employ thousands, provide goods, and show the world that Korea was capable of modern achievement. His next step would take him from building bridges to building something even larger, ships. Shipbuilding in Korea was considered a near impossible venture at the time. The nation had no significant shipyards, no experienced engineers, and very little capital. Yet Chung refused to let this deter him. He believed that with determination, learning, and careful planning, even the impossible could become reality. He invested all he had into Hyundai Heavy Industries. The early days were chaotic. Machinery broke down, workers were untrained, and investors doubted that a small Korean company could compete with giants from Japan and Europe. But Chung did not panic. He worked alongside his employees, studying technical manuals late into the night, learning how to manage the enormous scale of ship production. What set Chung apart was his combination of vision and practicality. He did not merely dream, he studied, he planned, he experimented. Each ship that left Hyundai's shipyard was a triumph, not just for the company, but for Korea itself. People started to take notice. Orders grew. Hyundai's reputation for quality and reliability began to spread, first across Asia, then to other continents. For Chung, this was not simply business success. It was proof that a poor boy from a small village could build something world-class, but Chung's ambitions did not stop with ships. He had always been fascinated by automobiles. He understood that cars were more than machines. They represented freedom, independence, and progress. Many told him that Korea could never compete with established car manufacturers from Europe and America. He was warned that Koreans would never buy domestically made cars, that quality would always fall short, and that foreign companies would crush his efforts. Yet, in the quiet of his office, Chung imagined the streets of Seoul filled with Korean cars, built by Korean workers, sold to Korean families. He began Hyundai Motor Company with the same principles that had guided his earlier ventures. He studied foreign designs, recruited talented engineers, and demanded rigorous standards. Every car that rolled off the assembly line had to meet his vision of quality. The first models were met with skepticism. Critics said Hyundai could not succeed. Dealers hesitated. Customers were hesitant to trust a new brand. But Chung persisted. He personally visited dealerships, spoke to customers, and insisted that every problem be solved, no matter how small. His dedication became contagious. Workers who saw their boss living alongside them in the factory, sweating and problem-solving day after day, developed pride in their work. The breakthrough came when Hyundai vehicles began proving themselves in reliability tests and in the hands of everyday drivers. Slowly, the narrative changed. Hyundai was no longer the small, uncertain company from Korea. It became a brand recognized for durability, innovation, and value. Orders increased. Factories expanded. Soon, Hyundai cars were exported to markets around the world, carrying with them the story of a company built from nothing by a man who refused to accept limitations imposed by birth or circumstance. Chung Ju-young's philosophy was simple, yet profound. He believed that nothing was impossible for someone willing to work relentlessly, learn constantly, and take responsibility for every failure and success. He insisted on honesty in business, loyalty to employees, and courage in the face of doubt. Even as Hyundai became a global conglomerate, he remained committed to the values learned in his childhood village: hard work, humility, and a determination to rise above hardship. As Hyundai grew, Chung also became a symbol for Korea itself. The nation was moving from poverty to prosperity, and Hyundai's rise mirrored that transformation. For millions, Chung's life story offered hope and inspiration, that regardless of where you start, the combination of vision, perseverance, and integrity can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. He had started life selling a single cow to chase a dream, and decades later, he had built an empire that would be recognized worldwide. Chung's journey was not without struggles. There were failures, moments of doubt, and countless setbacks. Factories burned, deals fell through, and at times, it seemed the dream might collapse. But he treated each setback as a lesson, a step forward in disguise. This resilience became the core of Hyundai's identity, a company that could rise from challenges stronger than before. Today, when people see Hyundai vehicles on roads across the globe, they may admire the cars themselves, but the true story behind the brand is far more compelling. It is the story of a poor boy who refused to accept limitation, who learned from every experience, and who dedicated his life to creating something that could endure. It is a story about hope, courage, and the human spirit's capacity to transform not just one life, but an entire nation. Chung Ju-young passed away after a life filled with remarkable achievements, but his legacy continues. Hyundai remains a testament to what determination, vision, and relentless effort can achieve. From rice fields in a small Korean village to the assembly lines of global industries, his story inspires countless people to believe that no matter where they start, extraordinary accomplishments are possible. As you reflect on this story, consider your own dreams and the obstacles you face. What small step could you take today, even if it seems insignificant, that might change the course of your life tomorrow? Chung's journey reminds us that it is not where you begin, but the courage to keep moving forward that defines success. I share stories like this every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.